So if we review the organization in our toolbar, we have selection tools, we have creation tools, we started to go over a bunch of the modification tools, and then below the modification tools we have some of the color tools. We already went over the gradient. We already went over the eyedropper. I believe we went over the eyedropper. Yeah, we did when we sampled colors from the pencil. And then the next tool that I want to go over is this one right here called the blend tool. Now, what's interesting is that we have the feature here as an icon in the toolbar. But I want to show you that under the object menu, you'll notice that the feature exists here as well. You'll notice that it says blend right there. So the blend tool, from my point of view, is an intermediate tool. Any of the features that appear under the object menu, I would consider them intermediate to advanced tools. The reason for it is that it requires that you know how to use other things in Illustrator to get this to work. It's not like you just click one tool and it changes it. I have to have a certain level of understanding in this software to get this to work right. Okay? So you'll notice that when I go to the blend tool, there's options for how the tool works right there. You'll also notice that it says make and release. Anytime you see the term release, that means that it will take the blend function and let it go, and it turns back into normal paths. Okay? So I also want to pay attention to what's going on in my layer panel as I'm using this feature. So we're going to go over thoroughly what's actually happening with our objects as we're using this feature. Okay, so what I'd like you all to do is I'd like you all to draw two different objects with different solid colors. Don't put a stroke on it, just solid colors, okay? So I'm going to draw a circle, and then I'm going to draw a star. And I'm going to make the star a different color. I'm going to make it yellow. Okay? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these objects. Okay, I'm selecting both of them. And I'm going to go to my object menu, and I'm going to select blend, and then I'm going to select make. Okay, so let's see what happens. So what did it do? What did it do? So when I open up my layer panel, I want you to see it turn my ellipse and my star into this group type. So this is a special group. It's called a blend group. A blend group. All right, does that make sense? So let me undo that. You'll notice that there isn't a blend group until I hit that function blend make. Okay, so you'll notice that in the blend group, I have 3 objects, not 2. I have the original ellipse, I have the original star, and I also have a path that's connecting the two. So I have 3 objects. All right, if I select the star and I move it, you'll notice that the blend moves along with it. Okay? If I click on the ellipse, you'll notice that the blend moves along with it. Which object appears to be on top? Which object appears to be on top?
Star.
The star. So you'll notice that the star was the second object I drew, and it's also on top in terms of stacking order. Do you see that? Okay. Let me separate these a little bit more. So I'm just using my arrow keys to move these around, okay? All right, so let's go to the blend menu. Let's go to the blend menu. When I go to the object blend menu, you'll notice that there's an option that says reverse front and back. Reverse front and back. So when I select that, you'll notice that now the ellipse is higher in stacking order. All right, so now the ellipse appears to be on top. So I can change it after I make the blend. All right, and then there's one more option I want you to see. Object blend, there's a function that says reverse spine. Reverse spine. Let's see what reverse spine does. What did it do? It swapped the objects. It put the ellipse where the star was, and it put the star where the ellipse was. All right? So, can I only blend two shapes together? No, I can blend more than two shapes together. So I'm going to go ahead and draw three shapes for this example and give them all different colors. All right. I'll do a polygon, and then I'll do a rectangle, a square. So three shapes, three different colors. Right, I select all three, object, blend, make. So you can see it works the same way. When I open up the blend group, you'll notice that I have my three objects plus the path. Now, the path is like any other path in the software. So this path has anchors on it. Okay, does that mean that I can manipulate the path? Absolutely. So if I click on this path, go to the anchor on the end here, and I click, remember smooth? Click on smooth, you'll notice it tears handles away. And you'll notice that the handles can be manipulated and the blend continues to follow the path. Can I add more anchors along this path? Sure can. So if I go to Pen Plus, add an anchor there, now the blend can be distorted or transformed from that position. Okay, so the blend is a collection of primitive shapes and a path that are that's snapping them together, and the color is being blended from one shape to the next. Yes, sir.
If you have an outline, what will happen?
Command Y.
No, I mean if you have a stroke.
So it repeats the stroke. Okay, so it's not going to look as nice. All right. So let me apply a stroke to this red object. And I'll set it to black. Make it thicker. Let's see it. So in this case, it didn't take it. Let me put this black stroke on the second object and see what it does. There we go. See?
Oh.
So what it's doing is it's making a series of copies of stars and polygons, and it's blending the shape along this path. So it's stacking probably like 500 little transformations here, and it's looking at the color and blending that as well. So if I have strokes on the objects, it's going to repeat the stroke, right? So it doesn't look very good. So usually when I work with blend, I make sure I don't have strokes on my objects. Yes? How I made the curve? All right, let me make this a little bit more simplistic. That way it comes through. We're going to look at making a blend with a gradient here in a second. Star and a ellipse. Star and an ellipse. I'll make this one yellow. So I select both objects. I make a blend out of it. Blend make. There's the path. Do you see the path connecting the two? See the path connecting the two? So it's like any other path. So if I go to Pen Plus, I can insert an anchor anywhere along that path. I'm going to insert an anchor right here. Now that that path has an anchor, I can move the position of that path, and the blend will follow it. Okay, the blend will follow it. All right, and since it's a path, I can click on this anchor and activate handles and make it smooth. And now that it has handles, I can grab a handle and I can distort the curvature of the blend. Okay? If it doesn't make sense, we can go over it during lab time, okay? All right, everybody got that? Remember I said you can release or break a blend? So if I go to Object, Blend, Release, see that just it undoes the blend, okay? All right, can I put a blend with a gradient? So in this case, these are solid colors. So what if I add a gradient? So I want you guys to pay attention to this, okay? This is really important. Really important. So one object has a gradient, the other one doesn't. Right? So I'm going to select both of them. Object blend make. What happened?
Blend.
It made one transition. It made one transition. And the other examples, it just blended it beautifully, right? So whenever you introduce a gradient, the blend by default makes one transition, and it's waiting for you to specify how many steps or transitions there should be. All right, so let me go to blend options, right? And so you'll notice that the default setting says smooth color. Smooth color does not work with a gradient type. I have to go to specified steps. And you'll notice that when I go to specified steps, how many steps are there? One. Right, so there's two. So the more steps I introduce, the more accurate the blend becomes. Okay, so if I type in 500, hit tab, it's going to start to look really smooth. Okay, so usually when you have a gradient and you're using the blend tool, I'll probably anywhere between 250 to 1,000 steps is probably what you're going to be looking at. In this case, 500 looks pretty good. Okay, so once you introduce a gradient, you need to specify the steps. So a student, peer of yours, was trying to create a gradient that was going into a point. A gradient that was going into a point. And he said, well, how do I do this? Right, so I want to show you an example, okay? So look, I'm going to make 3 ellipses, right? Doesn't this start to look kind of like a point? So I can make this really small, but I'm not. I'm going to leave it at that size, right? And I'm going to make these. It looks like you were working in grayscale. Is that correct? Now, this is just solid colors. Remember, I can add gradients to this, and that will also influence how the blend would appear, right? But I select the 3 objects, object blend, make. So now I have a gradient going to a point. Does that make sense? Okay. You think that might work for you?
So I can make a gradient that was like white, black, white, top to bottom, and then
Yeah, so you're going to do something like this. Make sense?
Yep.
So let's see what it's going to do with these 3. All right. Object blend, make. I got to specify the steps, remember? Blend options, specify steps. Let's do 250. Hit preview. So you see it's working right here. Right. Just make sure it has a gradient on it.
So we can change the gradient.
You can change yeah, I can change the angle on the fly. So if I select this object right here, I can change it to another gradient. I can change the direction of the gradient, and the blend immediately responds to it.
So useful.
I call this tool eye candy. I love experimenting with it. I think it makes some really beautiful things, but it's a very unique situation in which you would use this. Okay, so I'm going to show you where I have used this as a professional. So I've been working on UI stuff for many years, off and on again, and I had a client who we were making realistic buttons, really realistic buttons, and so one of the things that we were doing was making and realistic illustration. There's a term for it. You guys ever hear the term skeuomorphism? Skeuomorphism is illustrations that almost look like photographs, almost like hyperreal. A lot of Apple products use skeuomorphism, so this is using skeuomorphism. This is skeuomorphism. It's an illustration that starts to look like a real cone. Does that make sense? So if you look up the term in Google, you'll get all sorts of examples that, this is skeuomorphism. This is skeuomorphism. So we were making buttons that looked hyper-real. And let me put a gradient on it. And we would do stuff like this. Control V. Doesn't that kind of look like a button already? Right? So move this over here. Like this. Button. All right, so these look like they have a hard edge, right? But once I introduce a blend, do this one.
Can you use a radial blend at this point?
Any type of gradient you can apply to this. I didn't. I'm sorry. I should have used that as an example.
So, if you make one of the objects, you like remove the color from it, what will happen?
It's transparent. You can work with transparency too. It's pretty powerful, and I'll show an example of that later where it makes sense. Okay, 'cause a lot. If I show that right now, it's going to go over a lot of people's heads.
I get
You
it.
know, blend. Let me do this. Okay, object. I didn't hit make, did I? Blend, make. Okay, there we go. Object blend, options, specify steps, preview. 20. So see how it creates this bubbly jelly-like outcome? So the blend is helping achieve that. Let me grab this shape right here. Maybe I can exaggerate it. Let's see how it. I'm sorry, guys. I like to geek out sometimes. So let's see. So yeah, we were doing UI stuff that looked like actual raised surfaces and stuff like that. Long time ago. Anyhow, that's the blend tool. Any questions or concerns beyond can I apply gradients? We clarified that. No, we're good? Okay, so last thing for today. I want to show you last tutorial for today, and then we're going to go over the homework.